In this video, I'm going to talk to you about cold infusion, some of its benefits, and sometimes you might want to use it instead of another infusion method. And we'll look at 4 cold infusions that I love: a cold brewed dashi, a white tea, a lavender granita base, and an orange and cardamom infused gin. Cold infusion is a really simple technique, but it can give you fantastic results, as well as being easy, convenient, and beneficial to your workflow. Now, I'm not saying that cold infusion is always the best infusion technique to use, but in certain cases, it either gives you a very different result or gives you a very specific benefit. So it's sometimes worth thinking about whether cold infusion might be the right technique to use in a particular recipe. And I'm also not talking about raw food here, I'm talking specifically about using cold infusion for quality and deliciousness. So I'm going to talk about some of the advantages that cold infusion can give you before we get into some specific examples and recipes. One of the advantages that certain cold infusions can have is not extracting bitterness and tannins. They tend to be extracted at higher temperatures, so whilst a cold infusion might take significantly longer, because it never reaches those higher temperatures, you're extracting the flavour but not extracting bitterness or tannins. Another advantage can be retaining the freshness of an ingredient. So if you're working with a delicate fresh ingredient, heating it up for that infusion might damage its flavour, whereas a cold infusion can help to retain the freshness and the vibrancy. Another advantage of getting used to working with some cold infusions is that it can be great for your workflow. I'm often working on multiple projects and recipes simultaneously, so if I'm able to set something to infuse the night before and know it's ready for me to work with the next day, that works really well for how I work in the kitchen. And then finally, while I'm primarily concerned with deliciousness and flavour, there can be some health benefits to certain cold infusions. So, for instance, white tea can extract more antioxidants cold infused than hot infused. So first off, let's do a cold brew dashi. Now this is something I use a lot, and it's really convenient to be able to have a high quality, simple stock just on hand that you can use to add umami and depth to recipes. I really like the fact that you get a nice, clean, clear flavour from the kombu in this, so I don't add anything else to it really, although you could. I love the fact that this is really simple, both in terms of technique and in terms of flavour. And kombu is one of the most umami-rich foods around, and being able to add umami to plant-based foods is a really important thing to think about in terms of getting depth of flavour and deliciousness. So here I've got this beautiful high-quality kombu from Hokkaido, and I'm just going to place that in a jar along with some cold water. And then all that happens is this just gets left to infuse overnight in the fridge, and the next day you've got this beautiful, subtle, umami-rich, simple stock just ready to use. It's such a handy thing to have around, and if you're a fan of the flavour of kombu, then you should definitely try this because it's a lovely, pure expression of that flavour. And it's so useful to be able to just add a little of this just to add that umami to a dish. So most of the time there's a jar of this in my fridge, and I tend to keep it pretty plain. You could add shiitake mushrooms or other aromatics to it, but I tend to like it just as it is with that flavour of kombu, and I can add other flavours into my recipes in other ways. So next I'm doing a cold infused tea, and I'm using Malawi Antlers from the Rare Tea Company. It's probably my favourite tea. It's a beautiful, unusual tea made from the stems of the white tea, and it's got a beautiful peachy stone fruit kind of flavour. It's really aromatic, and this is delicious hot infused, but I particularly like doing this longer cold infusion. I think the flavours come out really clear, and again it's just super convenient. I can make this the day before, leave it in the fridge overnight, and the next day I've got this incredibly high quality tea just on tap. And once again, it just couldn't be easier to make. I take my Malawi Antlers, but this could be any tea, and cold water, and I'm going to fill up a jar. You could use a bottle and just place that in the fridge overnight, and 12 hours or more it will be beautiful. When it's infused, it comes out this lovely light caramel colour, and it's got that clear, beautiful aroma of peaches. And it's just one of my favourite things, and to be able to just reach into the fridge and grab it is amazing. On a hot summer's day, to have it over ice with a little bit of honey from our bees, it's incredible. Next up is a lavender infusion, which I use for a Granita base for one of the most popular dishes on my menu. Now, lavender can be quite an overpowering flavour, and also you can extract a lot of bitterness from the flowers. So cold infusion here gives me control over those factors. Once again, this is incredibly simple to do. I just have some dried lavender, some sugar, some butterfly pea flowers, which help to give it the vibrant colour that you associate with lavender without adding anything artificial, and some citric acid and some malic acid for a nice balanced acidity to this. Then I also have the juice of 2 lemons, the zest of a lemon, and then finally just cold water again. And once again, this is beautifully simple. All I have to do is leave this to infuse cold overnight. The next day I can strain it, and then I can freeze that and scrape it to make my Granita. The finished infusion has this vibrant purple colour and soft lavender flavour. Then I freeze this and I powder it with liquid nitrogen, but you could just scrape the ice like a traditional Granita. And it works fantastically. In the dessert, I use it against dark chocolate and honey. It offers a real contrast. It gives you a flavour of lavender which isn't overpowering, and for me conjures up summer's days by the beehives and really completes the dish. Lastly, infusing flavours into alcohol is a really obvious example of where cold infusion comes into its own, I think. Flavours infuse beautifully into alcohol at room temperature, and a lot of the time, even when I'm distilling, I will do a room temperature infusion first to extract as much flavour as possible, without damaging the freshness of ingredients. Often, because of alcohol's low boiling point, you really want to avoid heating it up, and especially with flavours like herbs and citrus, infusing cold can be perfect. Infusing flavours into alcohol and then blending them to create a spirit is called compounding. And if you aren't ready to take a jump to, say, distilling, but you want to play around and make your own gin, then compounding and cold infusing flavours is a great starting point for that. I'm going to show you a gin that I tend to make around Christmas time each year. It's just a really simple infused gin. It's not distilled. It's just a nice little thing that we got into the habit of making. So I have some cardamom pods, some orange zest, and lastly some freshly ground black pepper. And all I'm going to do is cold infuse that with some gin. Leave that to infuse and then strain it, and you've got a really delicious, really simple gin. And because it's a little bit heavier on the citrus and the spices, for me this really sits nicely in winter. Once it's infused, you can just strain and bottle this, and it's delicious. It's not a refined spirit, but it's a really great way to start playing about with infusing flavours into alcohol. And if you're interested in making your own gins, then compounding and cold infusion is a brilliant place to start. So that's it. It's a really simple topic and technique, but sometimes really simple techniques give you incredible results. Let me know in the comments if you try out any cold infusions yourself and how they go. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give me a like and hit subscribe. And if you'd like to see more stuff from me, you can also check out my Patreon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.